Dave, a few weeks ago, we both got a box in the mail that had some stuff in it. And some of that stuff was some airbrushes that we talked about in the last episode. And we'll probably continue to talk about those a little more. But there's also a bunch of other stuff because John Miller at Model Paint Solutions is really a generous guy, and we want to welcome him back. John, thank you for the care packages. Thanks for being a sponsor of the show, and thank you for coming back on.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Nice to be back.
It's been too long, and I will tell you the one constant theme that we heard up in Madison was literally everybody who came by our table said, is Dr. Strangebrush here? And is Dr. Strangebrush putting on a seminar? So you are top in the minds of our listeners.
Well, I appreciate that. What you don't know is I paid every one of those guys $1.
Well, I got news for you then. You spent some money, because I mean literally everybody who stopped by. I mean, it was one of the first things out of everybody's mouth.
Well, I admit I'm not a marketing whiz kid. This cost me a lot of money. So, but I appreciate I appreciate that. I appreciate, and I'm hoping to make the Nats next year. That's my intention. I will be there, and if they'll have me, my intention is to do at least one, maybe two different talks, both focused on airbrushing. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you guys down there. We'll have a beer.
Absolutely,
at least one.
Least one.
Back to those care packages. Well, one, I got to mention one thing before I even go down that road. Bob Baer, voice of Bob, did our ad redo of your ad, and I know from him that you heard that and were appreciative enough of that you threw a little love his way, and he really appreciated that.
I appreciate that as well. Bob does really good work, and he is a very personable, gentlemanly person to deal with as well. So,
yes,
yeah. So thanks for passing that on. I greatly appreciate that. And Bob, thank you for the spot. I appreciate the use of your voice.
There was a lot of mixing and measuring stuff in the care package, which we appreciate. I'll always appreciate the consumables, John. Thank you. But there was some stuff in there that kind of gets to what I want to talk about tonight in the time we have with you, is masking, because I've been working on this aircraft project of mine, the first airplane in 30 odd years, and I've been relearning a lot of masking, and you sent us some masking tape, and you sent me a burnishing tool, and I want to talk about this stuff because Model Paint Solutions sells this stuff, and I think it's all good, and I want to give you a chance to talk about it. So let's talk about the tape first.
Okay, sounds good. So let me just start out by saying, on Model Paint Solutions, what I try to do is carry at least all of the basic tools that I think most folks are going to need to sit down at the bench and shoot some paint on a model. One of that is just your basic masking tape. And on the site, we have the AK masking tape, which is very, very similar to me, almost identical. And I've got the 2, 3, 5, 12, and 18 millimeter rolls individually or as a combo if you want to save a little money. Two of the masking tools on the site that really get a lot of attention from customers, and I get really good comments, are the Aizu tapes. Now, these are super, super thin tapes that come in a roll. The thinnest is 0.40 millimeters.
Yes.
So think about that for a second.
It's like a hair. They are an amazing set of tapes, and I've used several of the Aizus and really like them for masking in tight spots or where you need just a little bit of tape.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, especially now I always say when it comes to masking canopies, if you can get the Edouard, die cut masking set, go for it. Those are a godsend. But if you're doing old special hobby or MPM or something that, for which there is no mask available, I'm a firm believer in being able to sit down at the bench and with the right tools, mask most canopies from, 1/72 all the way up. At least that's my experience. And one of those tools that makes that easy are the Aizu tapes because they are that thin. And the thinnest is just 0.4 millimeters wide. The next up is 0.7 millimeters wide. So we're still working, less than a millimeter. Then we get into 1 millimeter, 1.5, 2, and 2.5 millimeter. So all of those are available as individual rolls. They're also available, again, as a combo if you save a few bucks. So that's one product that, again, I get a lot of positive feedback from guys who buy those tapes and use them. Those used in conjunction with what I call the circle dot masks. And these I find super handy. I use these all the time. And what they essentially are a sheet of die cut dots, of increasing sizes.
Right.
The small sheet is from 1 millimeter. That's right, 1 millimeter, wide dots, all the way up to 2.8 millimeter. Medium is from 3 to 4.6 millimeter, and it goes up from there. These things are handy because, in particular, if let's say you are masking off a canopy that doesn't have square corners but has rounded corners.
Right.
An easy trick is to find a circle mask that matches, the corner diameter that you're going for. Put a dot in each one of those corners. You have now masked those rounded corners. Connect the dots with a thin piece of Aizu tape, and you've now basically masked off the periphery of your window.
Yeah.
So,
and then you can either fill in with tape or with some sort of liquid mask if you want.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I'm pretty picky about liquid masks.
Absolutely. I understand why.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of them out there, and a lot of them, I'm a firm believer in dipping my canopies in future. I've been doing it for 25 years, and I don't want to get too tangentized here. I see on a lot of the forums, some of these guys will go on the forum and just take off on, what's so special about future. There's so many things out there. There are a lot of other things out there. I will say, in my hands, nothing behaves quite as well for dipping canopies now as does the old future floor wax. And so I'm a firm believer in it for two reasons. Number one, if you dip your canopy in future and then you use gold CA odorless glue to put that canopy on, you're going to lessen the chances of crazing or fogging that canopy. So it's a combination of future dipping the canopy and using odorless glue. You won't craze your canopies anymore. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you do dip your canopies in future and you want to use a liquid mask over the canopy, what I find is Mr. Masking Sol R is about the one liquid mask that you can put on a future dipped canopy and not have the canopy go cloudy.
A lot of the masking products out there have ammonia in them.
That's it.
That attacks future.
Yep, that's it. That's it right there. But Masking Sol R doesn't.
Mr. Masking Sol R.
Yes, that's on the site, and that's all on the masking tools page there. So back to our example window again. If you're doing some kind of aircraft canopy and it has a frame on it with rounded corners, you got those covered with dot masks. You connect the masks with thin lengths of Aizu, and then if you want to, you can fill that framed window in with smaller pieces of masking tape, or you can take your Masking Sol R and a toothpick or a small brush and just paint right up to the tape, if you will, and cover the entire panel with just Masking Sol R. Really handy reagent to use. Oftentimes difficult to keep in stock, I'm going to be honest with you. So when I can get it from my distributor, I load up on it. It's spotty being able to get that through the year. So in other words, if you see it, pick it up, because I've had issues in the past. So that said, going back to our framed window, another tool that's on the masking page that I find, I honestly don't know how guys get by with masking models for invasion stripes or something like this and do it without this tool. And this tool is an embossing tool. And if you haven't seen an embossing tool before, imagine a BB that is basically the end of the tool, and this BB is on a metal rod, if you will. That's the very tip of the tool, and you can use this smooth, rounded end of the tool to burnish masking tapes down onto the model. Most of the issues that guys have with masking is getting bleed through or bleed under the side of the masking tape and ruining your line. If after you put the masking tape down on the model, you take your burnishing tool and just burnish that portion of the tape that's going to see the wet paint, because you don't necessarily have to burnish the whole piece of tape down along the whole width, thereby increasing the chances of pulling paint up, because you've now pushed the tape down so tightly to the model. just burnish that side of the tape that's going to see the wet paint. Now, on the site, I have one burnishing tool that has 2 different size styluses, round, working ends. I also have a set of 3 embossers that have 5 different size styluses. I find if you're going to make sure that you're going to get nice, clean lines, it is almost critical, mission critical, to take the time to emboss the tape down with this tool before you shoot paint. Mike, I understand. I know I sent you one, and I understand that tool's working for you, yes?
It is. And a couple of things. You mentioned the BB. So it's double-ended. One end of this tool is a round ball, a round bead on the end of an extended shaft. The other one, for lack of a better word, is kind of bullet-shaped, but it's a lot smaller. John, I've fallen in love with this thing. I've been doing a lot of masking on my E16 Paul, and I like this tool a lot. It's for the edge, like you've said. I use the ball end, but like on the leading edge of a wing edge, where I've been doing some masking, I actually use the side of the shank on this thing.
Oh yeah, you can do that too. Yeah,
and then I've had some corners I've had to tuck into, and what I've done using this tool, is lay the tape down on one edge of this 90-degree corner I'm going into, and leave the other end loose, and then using the pointed stylus on this thing, work that tape into the corner before I seat it to the 90-degree upright part of this corner, right? So this thing is let me do that. Now it's a little sharp on the end, but if you're careful, you're not going to cut the tape, but it lets you get that tape right in the corner. And I tell you, on my E16 Paul, I've masked the underside of the wing up to the pontoon strut, and I've burnished it in with this bullet shaped smaller end of this stylus, and then gone back and taken a scalpel and cut the tape away that wasn't burnished down into the corner. So end up with the tape just stops at the strut, but the strut has an airfoil shape on the front end. So I've burnished it in to match that contour, and then actually cut it with a scalpel and pulled the excess away. And now it matches the curve. And this tool is just really good. So if folks don't have one of these, they need to get one.
I'm glad to hear you to say that. Honestly, like I said, this is not a tool that they're not very expensive. They're $4 or $5 or whatever they are. I don't even remember the prices, but they're pretty inexpensive. But you'll get a lot of use out of this tool if you do any kind of masking. That's for sure. It's kind of a sea change.
I've got another use before we go too far. An issue I always have with masking is, how do you get the tape from after you've cut it from the roll to the model?
Yeah.
And get it to, when you get to the model, to get it to stick to the model instead of whatever you use to carry it there.
Right.
So I've been using this stylus as basically the transport vehicle. I cut the tape on my mat, lift it off with a hobby knife or a scalpel, get this thing under it to where just the ball end or the bullet end is right at the edge of the tape, and carrying it over to the model. And when I do that, I can get either with my fingers or another tool or whatever, just the minimal contact of the tape to the model using some other method is going to be a greater surface area than the tape attached to this stylus. And I can remove the thing without pulling the tape back off.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Nice. It does make sense.
And I really think that's, I just keep finding multiple uses for either end of this tool. And when a tool does that, it makes me happy. So
tool happiness is good. So I like to take a brief segue here and just say, what's interesting is your technique for getting the tape to the model. I do something similar, but I usually pick the tape up with a fine pair of forceps, and I'll place it on the model where I want it to be, and then I'll trap it with the stylus of my embosser in the other hand.
Yep, I've done that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the same deal. But I just want to segue real quick here and say that as I mentioned multiple times in a series of articles I did on canopy masking techniques, it's true for also just masking the model itself. For some masking jobs, it is really handy to have the model immobilized, so you have both hands.
Yes.
I think it's a mistake to try to hold the model in one hand while you're putting tape on with the other. Sometimes that's works if it's just a stripe on the wing or something. But if it's more involved than that, take time to figure out a way to immobilize the model or the canopy or whatever you're taping, so you've got two hands to work when you're arranging the tapes on the model. So little tip there.
I couldn't agree more. And I've got a building fixture I bought from a company who's at a lot of our shows in our region. And yeah, I do that because it's got these little tabs. I can put the model on the fixture, clamp over the wings so it's not going to move. And then I have both hands to, whether it's a pair of tweezers or this embossing tool or my fingers, I can use both hands to get the tape where I want it, because I just hate when a tape grabs somewhere you don't want it and you're just fighting it all the time. So
well, that said, in addition to the embossing tool being handy, another tool on the site, on the same page actually, are the mini scissors that I have been using ever since I stole them fair and square out of my research lab as a graduate student. It took me a while to find quality scissors to put on the site, and I'm pretty pleased with the ones that we have on there. These scissors are only about 4 inches long. They're very small. I carry both a straight edge version and a curved edge version. And when it comes to, like Mike was saying, if you're working in a small area and you're trying to mask something off, it's nice if you have to cut a piece of tape to be able to cut that tape with a pair of scissors that's only 4 inches long, versus grabbing a big old honking pair of scissors and, getting them close to the model.
Right.
So again, I think it's right above the masking tapes on that page. Straight scissors, curved scissors, as well as a scissor combo. You get them both in the same package. Two of the more handy tools in my experience for making a masking job easier is a good embossing tool, or a series of embossing tools with different size styluses, which again is on the site, or a good quality pair of mini scissors. In addition to that, I want to just go back real quick and talk about the dot masks. I've had the small, medium, and large dot masks on the site for a couple of years. Just yesterday, preparatory to having this discussion, I added 2 more sheets to the site of dot masks. These are progressively larger size dots. So check those out when and if you hit the page. They're now we have extra large dots as well as 4L dots, which are almost 10 millimeters in diameter. In addition to that, again, just in the last couple of days, I've added a kind of tape I've wanted to put on the site for a while, which is curving tape. And this is a plastic tape. It's a little rubbery. Rubbery isn't quite the word. It's stretchy, let's call it. But right. This tape is real handy for taping off curved areas, because it's sufficiently sticky so that it stays on the model even when it is applied in a curving kind of way. I've got 3 different sizes on the site now, 1, 2, and 3 millimeter. It's made by AK. It's AK masking tape for curves is what it's called. I've used this tape for years. If I'm doing, a hard line on the side of a fuselage, let's say OD on top and gray on the bottom. If that's a soft line, I usually outline that with a colored pencil. But if I want a nice hard line, if whatever the plane I'm doing had a hard line, I'll go to this curving tape and curve the tape right onto the area where I want it. Then I take my embossing tool, especially important when using this curving tape, and emboss all of those curved areas down with the stylus of the tool. And then you can get a nice curved line when you pull that tape with no bleed through. So curving tape, again, real handy and just added to the site. And then in addition to that, I want to talk real quick about something I've been using for a masking material, again, ever since I was first introduced to it in lab. And you don't see it that often in the hobby realm, and that is parafilm. Now, parafilm is essentially a sheet of paraffin. It is a paper-like waxy material that you can stretch, and you can cover anything in just seconds with this stuff. Once it's stretched, it becomes very pliable. It sticks to itself. It sticks to other surfaces, but not with such high affinity that it will damage paint. But, a quick example is, let's say I was doing an aircraft model, and I have to paint a white stripe from the leading to the trailing edge of the wing on this model. So after I outlined the stripe with tape and I burnished the tape down, I now have the outboard portion of the wing that's going to get, white paint on it, and the inboard portion of the wing, that's going to get fouled as well when I shoot my stripe. A real quick and easy way to cover both of those areas is to grab a piece of parafilm, stretch it. It comes in squares that are about 2 inches square, and you can pull that and it goes to about 6 inches long. And it is a nice thin sheet. And then in just a few seconds, you can simply wrap the tip of the wing with a piece of parafilm, wrap the inboard section of the wing with a piece of parafilm, and you're shooting paint.
That is exactly what I use parafilm for. I have heard a number of people who talk about other uses of parafilm, where they can do things like mask canopies with it and stuff like that.
Yep.
I've never been able to do that. But this stuff is really great for being the big piece of masking that you put on after you've masked your particular area where you're going to spray paint.
So it's like your gross overspray protection.
It's your gross overspray protection. And there is nothing better than the parafilm for that, because literally you just grab it, stretch it. It's almost like saran wrap, but thicker and not as difficult to handle. But you just stretch it, wrap it, and you've got your tip covered, or you've got the wing root covered, and you can go right to spray.
There's one more way of using it, though, and that is if you, after you stretch it, you can stick it onto a piece of glass, okay? And it will stick quite nicely onto the glass. And then you can take a straight edge and an X-Acto and cut it into strips or little squares. And those little, let's say you do that and you cut, rectangles of parafilm that are, 10 millimeters long and 5 millimeters wide. Okay. And those are all arranged on your piece of glass where you cut them, where you put the parafilm. And let's say you are trying to mask just the tiny little wing fillet area of a 1/72nd scale model. Those little pieces of parafilm are ideal for being able to work them into really tiny places and just burnish them down with your burnishing tool. Way easier than working tape in there because they're not as stiff, right?
Right.
And once you burnish them down, they're not going to leak. So, you're not going to foul the area that, that you're trying to mask. I use them mostly for the larger areas, like we were describing, a whole wingtip or sometimes a whole tail. Let's say you're doing a waistband.
I have wrapped an entire tail in parafilm before.
And it's worth taking 30 seconds and spending, 25 cents in parafilm to cover that tail, because, of course, the one time you don't, what's going to happen.
Exactly.
But in addition to covering those big areas, there's an article on the site talking about using parafilm, and I actually took some pictures of putting it onto a piece of glass, cutting it into small pieces, and then using those pieces as tiny little masking, masking materials. So anyway, very handy tool, whether you use it for small areas or a whole big, large, empennage mask. Handy tool, and one I've had on my bench now for over 30 years. Worth looking into. That, and one last thing, it's not on the site yet, but it will be by the end of this week. And that is, real quick, I'd like to go back to the window that we're doing on that hypothetical airplane model, where we use dots to cover the corners and connect the dots with Aizu. What if the aircraft you're doing has window panels in it, but the corners aren't rounded, but they're more triangular? Or, what if it's, what if you're doing a triangular window that has just three corners on it, and those are triangles? Well, I've been looking and have finally found a great little sheet of die cut masks that are right triangles and isosceles triangles. And they're quite small, on the order of 2 or 3 millimeters, each one of these triangles. Absolutely ideal for masking some of those sharp cornered areas, like on a canopy.
Like an ME-109, those 2 triangled windows.
In the front.
Right, in the front, just aft of the front part of the canopy.
On the windscreen. Another one that's really good is the same area on a Focke-Wulf 190, where you've got those triangle. Exactly. Those can be a real bear, as you know, in order to get them nice and tight. Well, now with this sheet, you can take right triangles or isosceles triangles, combine them in whatever angles you need to, and get a perfect pointy corner masked on your canopy. As I say, those will be up on the site the next day or two. And that about rounds out. I mean, I've been wanting to put these on the site now for a couple of years. And now with the triangle sheet, I'm pretty much at a point now where I can say most masking jobs can be covered with the selection of die cut masks and tapes that we have on that page. I'm pretty pleased with it.
Well, John, with the Aizu tapes for the super fine widths and the AK tapes kind of augmenting the Tamiya tapes, you got a wide range of pre-cut widths there. For a specific edge, I like to cut a new one, but for filler, it's nice to have all these widths on hand, I think.
It is.
Even if you don't cut your own fresh knife edge for a particular edge on your paint scheme, it's nice to have all these to fit and be able to just pick and choose and fit. And this 1.5 millimeter Aizu tape, I've already used about a third of the roll on my E16 just because I can take 4 or 5 inches of this stuff and take it in both hands with my stabilized model and put the middle of that length right where I want it.
Right.
And then wrap the other crap around to wherever it's not going to affect anything else. And I can mask that little bitty place in the middle where I need that width. And the rest just goes off to the sides wherever. But so I've really enjoyed this. So thank you for that.
And John, before you get out of here, I want to ask you something. Last time we had you on a while ago, you had premiered a service where you were giving one-on-one instruction with individuals for really almost anything, but obviously it was focused on your main talent of airbrushing and teaching people the yes and no, the ins and outs. So you're still doing that, I take it.
I am, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I spent most of my career in science teaching in a lab. I just enjoy interacting with people in general. I enjoy teaching as well. And, it's even more fun to be teaching a subject that I find just innately interesting and enjoyable, which is, of course, airbrushing. But yeah, the tutorial service, I offer 2 ways we do this. We just sometimes a phone call, 45-minute, hour-long phone call can prove real helpful for guys if they're having an issue with clear coats or primers or whatever. They may find through just an hour-long phone call that there were 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 tricks that they were missing that makes the job 1,000 times easier. The other thing we do is we do video tutorials, either by Zoom or by FaceTime or Zoom. And, for some people who want to see an airbrush technique demonstrated, I will set my brush and all my gear up on the other side of the link there, and I'll demonstrate, a fine line or shooting a clear coat or a primer coat. And when you see it done, it usually, it causes a lot of really good questions from the person who's being taught. They get to see it demonstrated. And most importantly, they get to learn what not to do, which sometimes is as important as learning what to do. So anyway, if the guys out there have been shooting paint for 10, 15, 20 years, and maybe they've been having an issue that has plagued them for that time, or they just want to think about upping their game, they should drop me a line through the Model Paint Solutions tutorial service. Just basically send me an email through the website, and we could pick a time to chat by phone, or we can pick a time to schedule a video tutorial. I've had a lot of really good experiences, and I've had a lot of guys walk away pretty pleased with what they were taught. So I enjoy it, and I urge everybody out there, if you've got a airbrushing issue that you'd like to discuss with a good doctor, send me an email. I'll be more than glad to talk to you.
I highly endorse it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us again, and we're going to get you on a lot sooner than we did between this time and the last time.
That sounds good, guys. Appreciate it. Good evening to you both.